whole numbers, rounding. So here we are going to go over a few rounding rules before we go into our examples. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify the place value you're rounding to, and we're going to go ahead and underline it. Then we're going to circle the number to the right of the number, underline. This number tells the underlined number what to do. And if the number circled is 5 or greater, so that means it's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then we're going to add 1 more to the number underlined. And if the number circled is 4 or less, so it's either going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then we're going to keep the underlined number as it is. And then everything after the underlined number becomes a 0. So let's do an example to show this. So example 1. There are 168 hours in a week. Round the number of hours in a week to the nearest 10. So we're going to do this first one. If we need to round to the nearest 10, we need to find the 10, and we're going to underline that. So the first number on the far right is the ones. We move to the left, and that's our tens. So we're going to go ahead and underline the tens because that's what we're rounding to. That's where we're going to round. Then we're going to look to the right of that, and we're going to go ahead and circle that first number, which is an 8. Now, if that 8 is anything in between 5 to 9, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we're going to add 1 more to it. So we kind of go, it's kind of like called rounding up. So we see it's between 5 to 9. So that means we're going to add a whole 1 to the 6. So then it becomes 170. Now let's look at this with a number line. So if we had a number line and we're rounding to the nearest tens, we have 160, and then we have 170. So we're trying to see which one it's closest to. This would be 165, and let's just go ahead and put 168 right here. Now, we can see that between, this 5 through 9, we would have to round up by adding a whole 1 to the 6, so it's 170. So we can see here visually that 168 is much closer to 170 than it is 160. So our nearest tens is 170. So that's why if we round to the nearest 10, it's 170. Now the second part of the question is round the number of hours in a week to the nearest 100. So the nearest 100. Well, 168 is between what two hundreds, right? If we were to draw a number line, we would have 100, and then we would have 200. So 168, let's find it. So we put the middle spot is 150, and 168 is to the right of that. So say, we can put it right there. Is 168 closer to 200 or 100? Well, visually, we can see that it's closer to 200. So the nearest 100 is actually 200. But let's go over the rounding rules to see exactly how we could do this with the rounding rules. So we have 168. We need to round the nearest 100. So we're going to underline the 100 spot because that's what we're going to figure out what the rounding is. So then we look to the right of that, and that's a 6. And that's going to dictate if we go, this 1 becomes a 2, or we're just going to keep it as a 1. But because 6 is between 5 to 9, we're going to add 1. If it's between 0 to 4, we would have kept it at 1. So, because of this rounding rule, we're going to go ahead and round it to 200. So that would be the nearest 100 is 200. Now let's look at another example. Example 2. Terry wants to drive from Moses Lake to San Diego. He would have to travel 1,231 miles. Round the number of miles to the nearest 1,000. So we're looking at the nearest 1,000 here. So let's go ahead and rewrite this number. Now, we know this is our ones, our tens, our hundreds, and then we have our thousands. So let's go ahead and underline that 1 there. Then we're going to go ahead and circle the number right to the right of it. So that's a 2. So when we are thinking about rounding rules, if it's between 0 to 4, so anything from 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we would keep it. So we're going to go ahead and then just keep the 1, and so we would make it a 1, and then every number after it becomes a 0. So now we have 1,000. So if we're going to round to the nearest 1,000, it would be 1,000. So that would be our answer. Now, also visually, let's look at this too. So this is between 1,000 and 2,000. Then we have 1,500 in the middle. Notice this 1,231 is a little bit like right there. Now it's not exact, but it's kind of like right there. So we can visually see that 1,231 is closer to 1,000 than it is 2,000. So we know we did our rounding rules, that we followed them. So now let's look at another example. Example 3. For a data technician job posting, the starting salary is $49,500 for a certain company. Round the starting salary number to the nearest 10,000. So we're going to go ahead and rewrite this number here. Now we have our ones, our tens, our hundreds, thousands, and then we have our 10,000s. So we're going to go ahead and underline that. Then we look to the right of it and we circle that first number, which is a 9. So that 9 is going to dictate to us if we go up or down. Because it's between 5 to 9, it's a 9. So we're going to go ahead and add 1 to the 4. So that becomes a 5. And then every number after becomes a 0 due to our rounding rules. So we would say the nearest 10,000 is going to be 50,000. So that would be our nearest 10,000. And right, then this makes sense. Because if we were to put 40,000 here, and then we'd have 50,000 here, this 49,500 is closer to like right there, we'll say. And so therefore, we know that it's closer to this 50,000 for the nearest 10,000.